Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to talk about our full moon that is going to be tomorrow morning, the actual degrees of the sun and moon being exactly across from each other is going to be Wednesday, February 16th. And here in Hawaii, it's 6:56 a.m. Pacific time, it'll be 8:56 a.m. and it'll go forward from there. So tonight's actually going to be the most fullest that the moon will be, at least for us. And it is in a star called Magha in Leo. Magha is where we begin Leo. It's in the water to fire signs of the constellations. There's no nakshatra that leads us from one to the next. With all the other signs, when you move from air to water, when you move from earth to air, when you move from fire to earth, we have a nakshatra that is bridging the two constellations. In this particular case, and in all the water to fire signs, we don't have that. There's a break, and it's called the Gandanta point, which is the knot. And then the new sign, the fire sign, starts with the nakshatra entirely in it. And then also the next star will also be entirely in that zodiac sign. So Leo starts off with Magha, and Magha is where we are getting that download that brings us into our power. So if you can imagine a king or a lion who is taking the throne, so they've graduated from, princedom, and they're no longer, in waiting or learning. They're ready to grace the throne, and there needs to be lineage, right? There has to be a reason why they're getting to grant this throne to begin with. Grace this throne to begin with. There needs to be training that occurs in that lineage, and there also needs to be something that sparks it, something that animates the power. So in many rulers and people who hold power, this is greed, right? This is a desire for power, a desire for money, a desire to control others, a desire to whatever, whatever the sort of various reasons might be that are parts of all of us. We all might have these sort of lower energies, but in someone who is a ruler or in power, it's particularly problematic, right? Because then they have the power to really get all that and to, in turn, take it from other people. So it becomes more of an issue. If somebody is aligned with source, right? If our rulers and our kings are aligned with source, which they are meant to be, if we look at in the ancient world, our kings were supposed to be closer to God. In Hawaii, they actually, the language even refers to that. The kings were the ali'i, and they were connected to the akua, to the gods. They had, literally, they were supposed to have a link to that. And similar in India. In ancient times, the rulers were not chosen the way they are chosen now, right? And not only were they born into it through lineage, but they also had it as their path. It was their dharmic path, their true path, the way in which they were meant to be here on earth, incarnated, was this, and it was considered a warrior caste. It's not as high as a Brahmin, who might be a priest and might have their whole life be associated with source, but it's a way of getting that download and then finding a way to bring that into the reality of ruling a kingdom or running a kingdom. And if we think about like one of my favorite ways to describe Magha is from the Lion King, because of course Leo is the lion, and that's the king, that they are the kings of wherever they reside. And one male lion will be the king of that pride of female lions, and they will rule a certain area, a turf that is theirs. And in the Lion King, if you've seen it, which many people have, Simba's father dies, right? And he's struggling with this, like, can I take the throne? His uncle tricked him and told him that he killed his father, and he ran away, and he doesn't feel like he can go back and take his place on the throne. He doesn't feel like he earned it or that he deserves it. Well, this is one of the best signs of a ruler, so right? Somebody who questions whether or not they even deserve to own the throne. Whereas a greedy ruler, or somebody who's trying to just take more power, will, they inherently know they do not deserve the throne, and they'll do whatever they have to do in order to get it. So Simba is questioning himself and wondering, and he gets this vision. I think it starts in a pool of water or something, but I think in the movie it comes up in the sky, which is where I got the idea for the picture I used. And it's like his dad in the sky telling him, Simba, you are the one true king. You must take your place on the throne, or the Pride Rock or whatever. And this is what Magha is. It's that the predecessors, the ancestors, it's ruled by the Pitris, who are the ancestors of mankind, and also now our guardian angels, right? They're the ones who gave us our lineage, and now they're watching over us and seeing how we're handling. And he's passing this message to his son. So for someone to rightfully take power, and all of us are kings and queens of our own empire, our own self. We all have our direct connection to source, which is our sun. We all have our moon, which is our psyche, our mind, our emotions, and all the parts of us that are playing out as a result of that direct download from source. So Mars in particular is the general of the army, right? And he's getting those orders, those marching orders from the king. So if the king is getting his orders from greed and from, all these other places, and or fear and anger, then Mars is going to march on those orders. Right? And everything else is going to be skewed because of that. Relationships will be problematic with Venus. What we're working towards with Saturn, that humility we have to work towards something, will be more fear-based, trying to maintain the power that we know we don't rightfully have. Our communication will be changed. Everything is affected by that. So if we don't have a pure download, if we don't have some kind of link to something higher than ourselves, and what's leading and fueling our power is, coming from a lower vibration, everything else will be affected in that way. And that's kind of how I like to think about it. We're each in our own little kingdom. But then, of course, in the world around us, there are actual rulers. There are governments. There are still some places that have monarchy. And there are large corporations, right? There are these huge entities that actually are controlling the governments of most of the Western world. So we have a lot of bad kings, let's put it that way. We have a lot of kings out there, a lot of people in positions of power, and not even just, presidents and high up people like that. But if you think of like the Congress of the United States of America, for example, have all been in there for a lot longer than any president will ever run. And they are the ones who've made most of the decisions about all the wars we're in, and which is a lot. America's in war more than any other country, really, of our own doing, of our own instigating, right? Usually to get something from these other countries, to get their oil, to get alliance, to get what we want. We have all these people making choices that really harm a lot of other people, whether it's giving power to petrochemical, financial, or pharmaceutical industries, or whether it's, like I said, going to war with some country, or choosing to aid a country to fight another country because it's in our best interest. So this is the kind of rulership that we are reckoning with in Kali Yuga, is that very few people are gracing any kind of power thrones coming from a link from source, coming from lineage, or coming from proper lineage, appropriate lineage, which would be that it was part of your dharma, part of your path in order to be in power, not part of your lust and greed for power, or just the fact that you come from, a lot of money or something like that, and it's handed down to you. So this is where we're at in our world, is recognizing how much corrupt power there is, and trying to find the power within ourselves to be able to do anything about that. Because the opposite of Leo is Aquarius, where we're humble, we're for the people. We want everyone to succeed. We want society to be fair, and we want the poor people to be okay. You know, we want to lift up the dregs of society. We don't want to have one central power that's controlling everyone else. We want it to be more doled out. And this axis of Leo and Aquarius, the government versus the people, or the power and the kings and the royalty and the regal versus the common folk, is one of the biggest issues we have in our world today, because increasingly the power is getting raised in these select hands, but increasingly the messaging is that we're doing more of the Aquarius thing. Oh, we're making it more fair. Everything's getting better for everyone. But meanwhile, inflation and everything else, the cost of housing, the financialization of the housing market, people are poorer and poorer. Maybe your house has a lot of value, but then you have to just live in that house. You can't buy anything else. It doesn't help you go out and shop. Most people who don't have houses that they own or land that they own, their rent is increasing if they can even find a place to live at all. So this is the bubble that we're in right now, where we're starting to really, it's starting to pop, right? The post-pandemic, oh, whatever we need to do in order to kind of keep everyone safe and give all this money to these people, and we'll do this, you know, that's starting to flesh out. The people who got their little, you know, meager stimuluses and whatever extra childcare tax they got, all the little people who just got whatever they could barely do that helped them pay rent for those months. Well, now what? Their rent's probably raised. There's someone else who can pay their rent who just moved here from wherever they left. And they're starting to be a real crisis. And it's just kind of the beginning part of this. And I expect to see a lot more anger come up over this as more planets start to funnel into Aquarius. Jupiter's there now, and the sun is just fresh moved in. So we're going to see that these two working together will activate a lot of that social awareness, social consciousness, and desire to really shine light on the corruption. But in order to do anything about that, we have to be empowered, right? The people have to be empowered. If the people are just kept down and poor and, oh, we can't do anything, and they're just going to keep, you know, or we're pacified by our wealth, which is what really happens in America, is that most Americans kind of have enough and have lived this consumeristic lifestyle for so long that they actually don't really see what's happening on a bigger scale. They just kind of, every day is about, you know, oh, well, I'm okay. Well, my family's okay. Well, we're living all right. And they just sort of accept each step down that they take on the ladder. And then, you know, until it gets really dire, you don't do anything about it. And in some places, dire has been for a long time, right? Dire has been the state of affairs, maybe since forever for them, maybe ever since they were born. So it really depends on your level of awareness. And I would say Americans probably have, you know, kind of the lowest level of awareness. And I've known that my whole life because I've traveled my whole life. And it's always been very evident that Americans are kind of out to lunch on that. And a lot of it has to do with the size of the country. The fact that, you know, you're just going into another state when you step over, you know, that many miles that way. Whereas in Europe, that would be another country. So you'd have to reckon with the different values, the different culture and all that. Also the heritage, the long legacy, that going back to that lineage, the ancestry. When people have that, they have more confidence because it's being passed down again and again. Your ancestors passed it to them, and the next people, the next people. By the time your parents raise you, this is just inborn knowledge that everyone in your culture knows, whether it's dietary, whether it's health related, whether it's social and the way that you interact, whether it has to do with dating and marriage, how you raise your children, everything is passed down. Whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. There's a confidence in that. There's a confidence that everyone collectively understands this is what we do. And you don't have to go around questioning it or wondering if your neighbor's doing something different. In America, everybody kind of has their download from a TV or from, you know, whatever they think, and there's different cultures and no one, you know, there's not that continuity. And every person that you see might have a very different value system than you, or there might just be some things that are different and some things that are the same. And so there's an insecurity. We're always reaching out to research something or Google it to find out what the answer is, because we don't know. We weren't raised to know. And, you know, the more this capitalistic mentality takes over, the more it's actually eating away at the culture in other places. The more you go visit these other countries and you see people just desperately wanting to be more westernized, moving away from their cultural roots, moving more towards this, you know, this modern way of doing things that actually denies culture. right? And actually denies lineage and says this is actually what's, something, if you look at like the pharmaceutical industry versus natural medicine, or it's like Ayurveda has been around for 4,000 years and it's been tested for all those years and been shown again and again and again to work. This pharmaceutical product has been tested for a few months and it's being advertised to you on your TV. And yet that's considered, traditional medicine in America. That alternative medicine is this medicine that's been studied for a very long time and actually been tested on humans for a long time, not in these limited trials with very skewed results. And it's not being advertised on your television set to you, or your doctor's not being paid in order to give it to you. So the whole system, the way that it works, is extremely corrupted. And at this point, it requires people getting that for themselves, understanding that, seeing what's going on, and not continuing to believe that these corrupt leaders are the ones who are leading us out of that. Because if we continue to buy into that story, then we're continuing to propagate what we are, our own demise. Basically, we're continuing to propagate the gap between rich and poor. We're continuing to propagate this this reality where it's going to be very hard to live, and more the money will be concentrated in smaller and smaller pools of people. So this is a reflection to that we do have power, because the rest of the cycle, and we just went through a new moon in Capricorn, right? And now there's going to be a new moon in Aquarius coming up. So these are both of Saturn signs. Saturn signs are right next to each other. So it's back to back, and Saturn's still in Capricorn. So the sun has been traversing up to Saturn, joined Saturn, and now he's past Saturn, but he's still in that window of combustion. So what it feels like for us is like, I've been doing enough. Haven't I done enough? I work so hard. Think of a regular person. I'm working 14 hours a day or 10 hours a day. Maybe I'm lucky to work 8 hours a day. I can barely keep my roof over my head and deal with my kids and do all this stuff. How am I supposed to step up into anything more than that? How can I not just stay on this hamster wheel? And of course, that's the point, right? The point is to keep everybody so tired and worn out. But with this combustion, what happens is we feel so put upon that we can't even do anything. We're just like, oh, it's too much. I can't do anymore. Why is everyone asking me to do so much? What more can I do? And this moon is giving us that reminder. Actually, you can do a lot. Actually, we each have power. We each hold autonomy. We each hold power. And every day we choose whether to agree with anything that's put in front of us, whether it's, whether you're in school, or whether you're, in a doctor's office, or whether you're at the bank, or whether you're agreeing to work within those guidelines and those rules. We're agreeing to the rules. We're agreeing to this government. We're agreeing to these things. So at some point, if we disagree, we need to do something about that. Because if we continue to just sit back and sort of take this passive role, or this humble role, no one really cares what I have to say anyway, or I'm not that important, then that's kind of what they're banking on. That's kind of what the people in power are banking on. And the more we can be aligned so that whatever power we hold is coming from a direct source and is not coming from this sort of our own fear, our own like survival, I must survive, because that's what ends up happening too, is that each step of the ladder, they're told, oh, the people beneath you are the ones who are going to kind of take from you. This is going to be the people. I'll never forget, in India, I was living there in this one town for a couple months, and I was living in this little fishing village with this family. And I would go every day to this town that had been a really hopping tourist town. Like, it had been a big tourist town near Pondicherry, and kind of it had like the seaside vibe, but it was down season. It was like not the tourist season at all. And I think maybe they'd had a slow tourist season or something. And there's a lot of disgruntled people who had changed their whole life to selling to tourists and maybe didn't get as much money as they wanted to. But I, was one of the few people there visiting, and I went to this person's cafe every day. It was a friend of mine, and I would cook at this cafe. And I just remember him telling me we were talking about the caste system, and he was telling about his caste, and he was in a low caste. But he was at the top of the top of the low caste. So we have the castes of Brahmin, we have the caste of the warriors, the Kshatriya, we have the the merchant caste, and we have the Shudra, the worker caste. So he was in that Shudra caste, but he was at the top of it. There's like different castes within the castes. And I don't pretend to understand the entire system. But I understand it in terms of astrology, in terms of how it shows up in people's charts, versus what they were born into, right? But I just remember him telling me how, oh, there were these people who were beneath him, and they weren't even allowed in his house. They weren't even allowed to eat off his plates or his family's food, because they were beneath him. And I just, in my mind, I'm just thinking, and at the time, I think there were elections going on too. And there was a communist party that was going up for election. And then there was this sort of more centrist party, and his family supported the more centrist party, despite the fact that they probably would have benefited from a more communistic party. He didn't see it that way, right? He just saw it as this thing where, well, there's people beneath us, and we don't want them coming up into our house. We don't want them eating off of our plates. And I understand there's a lot of culture and tradition around this, and I'm not trying to mock that, but what I understand also is that anyone who's low on the totem pole is told that the lower people are going to take something from you. So we end up in this situation where you're always, well, at least I'm better than these people, right? And that's kind of what's being used against people right now. Oh, well, I have my needs met. Okay, well, I have a house. Okay, things are getting worse, but I have this. And we don't realize that at some point it's going to actually be you too. So, those divisions in India have been there for a long time, and they, maybe people that have more faith that they won't move out of their caste as a result of that. But the point is if the whole world, if we're all in a situation where money is just more scarce and resources are more scarce, everyone will take a step down, right? And most people will take many steps down, while certain people will move up and hold. And this is what late stage capitalism really looks like. And we're living it. We're in this moment in time. And some of us have seen it coming for a long time, and don't buy into that mentality. But a lot of people are just keeping themselves safe, keeping whatever they can safe. And that's really part of the Saturnian energy, is fear. Well, I need to survive. Well, we need to keep ourselves safe. But in the end, if anyone is not safe, if anyone is poor, if anyone's dying, it's kind of everywhere, right? That's the truth. The true reality is that if it's happening somewhere, it's happening everywhere. And so we need to tune into that, tune into our own direct reflections from source, and start to own our power and start to find the ways in which we can empower ourselves in our own life. We don't have to be corrupt. We don't have to do things that harm the environment or that harm other people or that harm society in order to make it. We have to trust what we know, and we have to trust that other people also are in that know, and work together, because that's the essence of Aquarius community. We all work together as a society. It works best for the people in power when community and society isn't really working very well for each other. It's easier to grab more power when people are at odds with each other. It's harder when everyone's working together, because then they're not going to fight and they're going to see what's happening. So this is a wake-up call in many ways for all of us to listen to that deep wisdom that comes from your own ancestral past. Even looking through old pictures and things like that, and asking questions to your family members that are still alive about who your ancestors are, can be so empowering. Just finding out where you come from, and maybe some spark of something hits you, like, wow, that person, did this, and I feel that within myself. Maybe it could be something in the arts, or it could be some kind of person who was a hero of some sort, whatever the different things are, an inventor, that you might be tied to in ways that you don't even realize. We often feel a lot of shame about our ancestral lineage, especially if we come from European lineage. But there's people from the past that were pioneers, or that were, perhaps doing the right thing in the wrong moments, or moments of corruption and chaos. And of course, those moments have always been. It's not that we haven't always lived in times where there were people trying to grab power and people being held down by that. It's just that at this point, it's very easy to see, right? With the internet, with the connectedness of the world and our capacity to see what's happening all over the place, we can see that. Pardon me, there's some dryness from the Sun-Saturn conjunction as well. Well, they're not in the same sign anymore, but they're still combust, which can be creating some, some stuff in your throat, needing to take in a lot of moisturizing ingredients. And here we're starting to get allergies from the plants, and the seasons starting to shift a little. So this is, I'm going to get off the soapbox on that right now, but that is really a big download from this Magha, full moon, and the sun joining Jupiter in Aquarius. We still have Mercury joined Saturn in Capricorn. And as of right now, Mars and Venus, and you know what, I haven't even been showing I've been on such a soapbox, I haven't even shown the chart. So here you can see the moon is at 349 Magha, and you can see the sun at 349. This is just the rising sign for the exact time of the full moon. And it's in the sign where the sun is, and Jupiter here at 1644 and set to Bishak. So Saturn and Mercury are joined here, and Mercury is moving slow. Mercury and Venus just finished retrograde. So Mercury is going to move in towards Saturn and will become increasingly, it's interesting that with my throat, what's going on right now, because one of the things I said to my yoga class this morning is you might have difficulty speaking as Mercury gets closer to Saturn. We get fear and constriction around our speaking, or you can lose your voice. That's actually something that happens to me sometimes. When I'm quiet, I'll lose my voice. When I do a Vipassana retreat, or I do something where I'm really quiet, my voice will go away. But this Mercury Saturn conjunction can make us feel fear around using our voice. But not always speaking is not always the first thing to do, right? Often our first instinct when we feel something or we feel rage about something we see is, type it out, put it on Facebook. Somehow make it known that we're unhappy. But the truth is that action speaks a lot louder than words, right? Most of the time words just agitate people. And if we're not going to sit face to face with someone or in a circle with a group of someone's and really have a reasonable conversation, because when we do have those reasonable conversations, I found even the most contentious of topics with people who even fall on completely opposite sides, it's really not that hard to have a good conversation when you're with somebody face to face, because the truth of the matter is you both want the same things. You both believe the same things. It's just that you've been told from different sources that different things will make that happen. So usually the arguments are a lot less when we get into these face-to-face conversations, at least around bigger issues. Interpersonal relationships, that's not always true with personal relationships. And we'll talk about the Mars-Venus thing in just a minute. The face-to-face conversations can be problematic sometimes actually in those cases, but that's because there's so much charge. So if we allow ourselves to channel that wisdom, channel that knowledge, and then also find action, like write it down, what are the actions we're going to take with these planets in Capricorn? And what's going to happen is that Mars is going to move into Capricorn. And I'm going to take a moment here and just pray that this time changer tool doesn't flip it off, because it does so often, but we're going to see if we can make it happen. We have Mars and Venus joined here in Sagittarius still, and you can see that they're exact pretty much, right? This is going to continue, this Mars Venus back and forth, and everybody likes to use the word war, and it's the translation of the Sanskrit, but I prefer not to use that word because it's really not, it's our concept of war at this time is very different than the intention of the word. And the battle, if you will, or the neck and necking of Mars and Venus right now in Sagittarius can be bringing up a lot in our relationships. And this can even add to the other issues I was just talking about, when we're trying to bring up bigger issues, political issues or social issues or financial issues and stuff like that. This Mars Venus can play out, but obviously in your interpersonal, specifically romantic relationships, it's going to be the most heated. And what it is it's the battle between wanting to compromise, get along, harmonize, and relate to someone versus wanting to individuate and strengthen oneself and discipline oneself and show up for oneself, which is Mars. And so when these two come together, it's a battle, because it's like, should I be getting up and doing my yoga and praying and meditating and then going and doing the work I need to do for the day and then coming back and getting enough rest and eating a good meal? Or should I go have a, dinner with my sweetie and stay up too late and not get enough sleep and then not feel like getting up and doing my yoga in the morning or whatever? This is sort of the battle between Venus and Mars. It's like, which do I choose? And it poses to us that there's a choice between the two, that we have to do one or the other. And this is a lot of our issues in the world to begin with. And Mars brings that up for us. It's this black or white. It's this or that. It's that or that. And it's wrong. There isn't just two choices for everything, right? We need to evolve past that. Mars and Saturn bring up a lot of our root issues, a lot of our animal stuff, a lot of the reptilian brain issues, the fight or flight. It's this, it's that. We die or we live, we fight or we flight. But the truth is that there's room for all of it. Like if you wake up early and you meditate and you do your yoga practice, you'll find you have more time, and that you're more graceful in your interactions with other people, and that you're more likely to compromise and be okay because you don't have all this frustrated anger because you didn't exercise or do anything to get out your anger earlier. You find that it feels more nourishing just moment to moment. And then you can decide if you have time to have dinner. If you want to have a, special dietary dinner, you can do that with the person, or, there's so many ways beyond what we see often. And that's part of compromise. And that's part of relationships, and relationships that work understand that. They understand that we can't be constantly giving ultimatums to people or making life just this black-white choice. There's more choices. And that's how we relate to others, is we find those more choices. We find the options that are beyond our initial reptilian brain's experience. And it requires tapping into the heart, right? It requires moving into that place within ourselves that can see beyond the blinders or the fear and the anger. And so this will be going on, March 11th to March 16th Venus is going to start speeding up more and move out of the degrees. And I wanted to talk before I did this because I just knew it was but maybe not. But we see that they're continuing in these really close degrees for many days past this full moon. And at the end of February, right? February only has 28 days. We don't have a leap year this year. So on the 25th, we see the moon is joining Mars and Venus here. So that's going to bring our mind, our emotions into the mix with this Venus-Mars duo. And then Mars is going to move the next day into Capricorn. Venus and moon will stay there for a day, but moon moves quick, right? The moon moves quick, and there we go. February 27th, we have 5 planets there. And my software, I don't even have the Pluto up right now, but Pluto's there too. So it's really 6 planets. So this is a lot of Capricornian energy, right? All the pressure, all the stuff we have to do, all the things we have to do. And it can feel like quite a lot to have this much stuff to do. The sun will be out of combustion with Saturn at this point. So we won't maybe feel so put upon. Maybe we won't feel so like, I can't do any of this, but we'll be catching up from all the stuff we didn't do before when we did feel put upon. And it's just a lot of work and survival energy with Capricorn. We lose some of the fun, we lose some of the playfulness, we lose some of that joy as we move into, and then the day, well, this is the 27th. So it's going to be the new moon. So we see the 27th and 28th, the moon will be joined all these, and then we'll have the moon joining the sun here in Aquarius, and that will be our next new moon cycle. So the other thing is, as the moon gets closer to the sun, it's waning, right? It's a waning moon, and the energy within our mind is also waning. It's kind of depressing. If we see people in their chart, when they're born really close to the new moon, they tend to have a more depressed outlook. They're less engaged in the world. So this can be a time when a lot of people really start to feel, sadness, whether they couldn't handle the Mars Venus thing and it just got really intense, or, whether the weight of the world and all the things that are going on become too much, or the solitude, Saturn also brings us to solitude a lot. So a lot of people are feeling very alone right now. And Mars Venus can bring that up as well, that, the ways in which we've tried to individuate ourselves that have actually kept us from having love, that have actually kept us from having relations. And, again, with Mars and Saturn, we want to put that energy on ourselves. We want to discipline ourselves. We want to humble ourselves. We want to work hard. We want to act, we don't want to put that on other people. We're not trying to discipline other people. We're not trying to get angry at other people. We're not trying to put our fear and our pressure on other people. With Venus and Mercury, we want to give that energy to others. We want to share information. We want to share our love. That's how we best experience it, is by sharing it, not just feeling good ourselves all the time. It's the sharing that makes it so beautiful. So for people who have a hard time with that, this cycle can be quite tough. Of course, it'll all depend on what these planets rule for you, what houses they're in, and all of that. But it's, it's a time right now, and people are going through it, and I really recognize that. And it's kind of funny that this Valentine's Day fell right when Mars and Venus got super conjunct, and it was actually on February 14th that they became, basically same degrees. And so the good thing, the good news, the silver lining here is that Mars is actually in really good dignity. He was in really good dignity in Sagittarius, where he is right now. Now I've moved us all the way to March 1st. But he was, and can I get us back to where we are? Yeah, March 15th here. One more day. Okay, there we back at our full moon. He's in really good dignity in Sagittarius. We have a lot more chance of discipline, a lot of opportunity for discipline. Venus is not as good in Sagittarius. Venus is where we get philosophical in our relating, and we kind of bypass the actual experience people are having, and we have, instead turn to some philosophy. But in this particular case with Mars, Venus together, it can be helpful that we might not take everything so personally. It might not be such a sensitive Venus where every single thing is hurting at our heart so much. Maybe while actual Valentine's Day was going on and the moon was in Cancer, we might have felt particularly sensitive and touchy, but now the moon's in Leo for this full moon, and we'll see ourselves being able to stand up a little bit and take some responsibility for our own emotions and our own autonomy. And as these two move into Capricorn, we'll see Mars move into exaltation. So really a place to channel our anger, a place to channel our action and our discipline, somewhere to go. And it's long-term and it's survival related, but it's earthy, it's grounded. There's an opportunity for us to funnel it. And that way it doesn't come out in anger, because we're doing something. And that's what Mars wants to do. Mars wants to do something. Ideally, it's strengthening oneself, working towards a good goal, all of these things. But if we don't want much frustrated Mars energy, then we can't be lazy. That's why Mars is debilitated in Cancer, where we're like emotional and passive aggressive and trying to find something to cling to. And it's like Mars is trying to individuate. It doesn't want to unconditionally love and feel like, it's fighting through pillows. So I always say Mars in Cancer is like a pillow fight. It's like fighting through pillows. So then we have Venus moving into Capricorn, and Venus is also in good dignity in Capricorn. Venus is grounded, practical, has reasonable expectations of other people, is willing to do things in service for others. It's coming from kind of a selfish place. It's coming from a utilitarian place of necessity and all of that, but it's a willingness to roll up the sleeves, that Saturnian energy of humility, roll up the sleeves, get down on your knees and do something, dig. And so Venus and Mars in Capricorn will actually, in many ways, bring action to the war or the battle that's going on, and allow us to find the proper ways to individuate and strengthen ourselves and work towards a goal, and funnel that energy that could turn to anger, and also be more willing to accept the limitations of other people, just like we accept our own limitations. And that's one of the biggest things we're learning in this whole cycle with Saturn and Capricorn. I've talked about it a lot, but the more planets that pile up in here, and even in Aquarius, we have to recognize Saturn signs. Not only is Saturn here, really all these planets are becoming conjunct with Saturn at some point, but they're in those signs. And Saturn is where we're moving away from life, from juice, from rasa, from moisture. We're drying, we're aging, we're decaying, no matter how old you are. 20-year-olds feel young, feel like they're crickety right now. Your bones aren't working as well. Your lower back is hurting. We're dry, we're stiff. Our throat is like, it's an aging, it's a dying, literally, is what this area has to do. And it's very depressing at times. It can feel very depressing. So holding yourself in that compassion, but also trying to do things to moisturize yourself using abhyanga, self-massage. Sesame oil can be very moisturizing. Finding ways to take rest between, traditionally in yoga, you do asana and then you rest, and you do asana and then you rest. There's quite a lot of sort of versions of shavasana that might occur. In Western yoga classes, it's usually like, keep working. Oh, I've heard teachers say, I don't know how many times I've heard a yoga teacher say, keep going while your muscles are warm. And, there's this like Western mentality of like, keep going, push yourself past this thing. And I'm like, okay, maybe when you turn 30, you'll change your mind on that, because ultimately our body needs to assimilate what we're doing. And in this moment, it really needs that extra time to assimilate, because we are more creaky. There's more wind, dry energy and less of the moisturizing life youthfulness that we need for our muscles, for our joints, for our cartilage, for our everything. So this is where we're at right now. It's fun times for all, and I have spoken for a long time, so I'm going to bring this to close. But I hope that you have a blessed full moon, and I really, really hope that you find an opportunity to sit with yourself and get your download, get your, a piece of like, I think of it like a straw, often come to like, oh, it's so great what you're saying, or you're so great. It's like, when I'm speaking, I feel like I'm a straw. I'm sticking a straw up and I'm getting this information. It's not me. Right. And that's, I think, something people don't get in our world. We've moved more towards what we would call the third house kind of mentality, where everything's us and I get credit for this, and I also have to hold all the weight when everything's going wrong. Everything's me pushing a boulder up a hill. But when we have faith and we slow down and we recognize, like, it's never all going to get done. There's never going to be enough time. What is time? Time and space is like, I had a teacher, someone like a singing teacher, beautiful songstress, Mary Isis, who offers variations on mantras and other of her own lyrics, beautiful songwriting, say something to the effect of, well, I just lost my thought in saying who it was that that I was referring to. What was the thought that I had there? Well, maybe it'll come back around to me again, or maybe she'll bless me up with a comment to remind me what I was thinking of. But this notion that we, that we have to be doing something or be a certain way or rush ourselves through something, that there'll be, oh, that's right. She prompted us to talk about sacred space. What is sacred space? And the first thing that came to my mind was time. Sacred space is time, because if you don't have time, then you don't have sacred space. You can make a beautiful altar, you can make a beautiful home, you can make anything you want. But if you're not having the time to sit there and sit in that space, then it's moot. And when I was in India, I remember this was actually my first trip to India, and I'd probably only been there for about 3 weeks at this point. So it was very, very fresh off the boat. And I remember driving in this rickshaw through Haridwar, and I was coming from Lakshman Jula, which is above Rishikesh. And I was driving down and I see this trash pile, like an epic trash pile, like huge, massive trash pile. And this man is sitting on the trash pile meditating. Like, he looks like Baba. He's got his head in the twist, and he's not wearing a lot of clothes and all that, but he's sitting there meditating. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And my friend said, oh yeah, he had a name for him, that guy does that. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And it's like, well, I guess that's the state we're all trying to get in, right? Where we don't need to create some like huge mansion house, right? Or even a simple house with a special sanctuary to be quiet. Once we evolve enough, we can sit in a trash pile with lots of traffic and pollution and noise and chatter and all kinds of stuff walking past us, and still be in that state of calm. We don't need everything else to change for us to be okay, right? And everything else can be at its absolute pitch worse, and we can still be okay. That's the goal of all these practices, actually, is to get to that point, but not to preach that to everyone else, not to stand there and say, well, you should be calm in the midst of all your trouble, to have empathy for people and understand what their struggle looks like, but in ourselves, move ourselves closer and closer to that state where we can find peace, regardless of how unpeaceful it is around us. And the more we can tune into that, the more we can share that with others, and bring some balance back into this world. And the last thing I'm going to leave us with here is, I don't know why all these things are just coming into my head right now, but Guru Singh, who many of you might know, he's a teacher of Kundalini yoga, and he was one of Yogi Bhajan's first students. And I took classes with him for years and years in California. he's one of my favorite speakers. The things he says are just both funny and enlightening at the same time. And I feel blessed because I actually share a birthday with him. But he said, he was telling us the story of when the class with Yogi Bhajan was in the little carpet store on Robertson, and they would sit there and have their classes. And there was one guy in the class that nobody liked, right? This one guy was like loud or obnoxious. I don't remember what his characteristics were, but we all know somebody like that. It's just like, how is this person acting like this? How are they not aware of how ridiculous their behavior is? And I actually told this story when Donald Trump came into office, because everybody was, freaking out when he first got elected, really his whole term, but when he first got elected, I actually had my baby like 2 days later. I went into labor right after he was elected. So I had kind of a different, mindset around it all. And I just remember stepping back and having that thought come into my head where it was like, oh yeah. So when this guy one day didn't come to class, everyone was like, yeah, he didn't come to class. Okay, this guy sucks. I'm so glad he's not in class. And Yogi Bhajan looked at the class and said, well, I don't know why you guys are so happy. They said, you don't like this guy, you think he's an asshole, and he didn't come to class today. He was like, but now you all have to share that. You have to divvy that up amongst yourselves, because that asshole energy is still here. and now you each get to have a part of that. You each get to be a part of the asshole. And I just really loved that, because I'm like, it's so true, right? We want to put it on this enemy, this person, this one entity, this one group, this one thing, but it's here. Energy is not lost, right? It's not destroyed, and it can't be created. It's just getting recycled. So the more we put it somewhere else and then oust that thing, whoops, now it's back at us. Now we all have to share it. And I just think that's great. So that's another good thing for this Leo full moon and this Magha, is to recognize that we can want to dethrone one human or dethrone one entity or one group and try to, and we all have these images when something just really pisses us off, but and feels unjust, and rightfully so, right? There's so much injustice. But if we were to get rid of that one thing, it doesn't make it better. And that's the truth of it, is that we have to actually go from the root out and recognize the foundations that things are built upon, and recognize within each of ourselves, whatever we're seeing outside of us is actually in us too. It's part of that sun, moon, full moon thing. The sun is consciousness, and it is reflecting on the moon. That is why we see the moon, right? That's why we don't see it at the new moon, and we do see it at the full moon. It is reflecting the light into our mind, into our consciousness. And from Vedic thought, that is the thing that carries from life to life, is our moon, the part of us that is our psyche. So whatever we're seeing outside of us, it's inside us too. Namaste.